Hello and welcome to Network Africa. Coming up on the program, it's D-Day for former President of Ivory Coast as he appears in court. He pleads not guilty to the ICC charges. Then President al-Bashir of Sudan orders the reopening of the country's border with South Sudan, which seceded from the former in 2011. And later, Zimbabwean farmers fear the worst as crops and cattle succumb to the worsening drought. Again, we're thrilled to have you join us on this last Thursday in January of Network Africa edition on Thursday. And this is Channels Television. I'm Cynthia Are. Topping our news is the trial of former Ivory Coast President Laurent Gbagbo. And Mr. Gbagbo and an ex-militia leader have appeared in an international criminal court for various crimes leveled against them. Mr. Gbagbo has denied the charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity, which relates to the country's civil conflict that erupted after he lost elections in 2010. He is the first ex-head of state to stand trial at the ICC in The Hague. Now, here are just some historic dates as regards Mr. Laurent Gbagbo. Back in 1971, he was jailed for subversive teaching. In 1982, he was in exile in Paris after a union activism. In 1988, he returned to Ivory Coast. In 1990, he was defeated in the elections. As of 1992, he was jailed after student protests. And then in the year 2000, he was declared winner of disputed elections. 2 years later, there was a failed coup which divided Ivory Coast. And as of 2007, there was a power-sharing agreement between the government and former rebels. In 2010, Mr. Gbagbo refused to accept election defeat and a civil war broke out. On April 2011, he was forced from power and arrested. And on November 2011, he was transferred to the ICC at The Hague, and that's where he is currently being tried. Here's a list of the charges leveled against Mr. Gbagbo by the ICC. He's being charged for murder, rape, other inhumane acts, and persecution. For more on what's happening regarding Mr. Gbagbo's trial, we're joined by former ICC prosecutor, Mr. Charles Adeogun Phillips. He joins us from Lagos. Mr. Adeogun Phillips, thank you so much for joining us. Now, I'd like you to tell us more about the significance of this trial.
Well, it's very significant in and of itself, in the sense that this is the third or fourth trial that the ICC will commence in the over a decade history of that court. This also, as you rightly pointed out, the first trial of former president before the court. So it is extremely significant to the activities and the success of the ICC institution.
Now, Mr. Adeogun Phillips, we've been getting most of our updates from social media, especially Twitter, and we understand that the judge said at some point that the case would be made public. Now, based on that statement, what exactly should we expect?
All trials before the International Criminal Court are indeed public, unless specific witnesses have indicated to the prosecution or to the court that seek some external or extra protective measures to conceal identity. You would very quickly expect a robust prosecution, which at the end of which would result in the commencement of a defense case if the facts are not challenged at the halfway stage. So it would take the form of any trial. I expect quite a bit of military presence and witnesses from the both sides of the conflict, both the Ouattara side and the Gbagbo side.
Now, finally, Mr. Adeogun Phillips, you did mention just now that it could be a robust prosecution, but knowing the gravity of the situation, how long do you think it might actually take before we see this trial conclude?
international trials, international criminal trials are extremely complex, and they are trials conducted away from the location of the conflict. So you would imagine that every witness that will testify in that case will be flown to The Hague from Abidjan, and both for the prosecution case and the defense case. Many of these witnesses are most unfamiliar with foreign territory. Many have never been on a plane. Many have never held a passport. So it does take some time to settle witnesses down before they can commence their testimony. I think we're looking at a 2 or 3 year long trial here.
Well, we'll see how it all plays out. Mr. Adeogun Phillips, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, Cynthia.